Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome to another episode of AuthorityLabs. Today, we're talking about in-house SEO, and we have three amazing in-house SEOs to help walk us through what their process is like, what some of their biggest struggles are, and how they survive the day-to-day as in-house. So with us, we have Topher Kohan, who's the Senior Product Manager of the Weather Company at IBM. We have Keith Goode, who's also with IBM, and Jackie Chu, who is the SEO lead at Dropbox. So to first get started, I'd love to hear more about all of your guys' stories, how you really got started in SEO, how you became an in-house, why you chose in-house over agency-like. Keith, if you could please start us out and tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm old because Topher just told me that if you know anything about the Florida update, you're old. My name is Keith Goode. I am the senior SEO strategist at IBM, and I have been doing SEO for quite a while. I've lost count of the years, but I know I've been in online marketing in general since 1998. So 21 years, quite a while. I think I've been in my sort of online marketing since before you were born, Ashley, right? Is that correct? Just kidding.
Ouch.
Ouch. But no, I logically went into SEO because I have a literature degree, and my first job out of college was building computers and networks. So that makes all the sense in the world. I loved writing, and I understood that in order to communicate effectively in the future, we would need to do that online. So it just sort of worked my way into it. Worked for companies like AMD, HomeAway, which is now for VRBO, Dell, and now IBM. So it's been a long time coming. I actually prefer in-house simply because the pace of it and the focus of it helps sort of work really well with my personality. I like working with people. I like teaching people. I like essentially seeing something follow all the way through to completion. So and in-house gives you the opportunity to do all of that, and of course sometimes it's an immediate thing, sometimes it's 2 years later you get what you asked for. So but either way, I also like Zen, so I get to practice Zen a lot as an in-house SEO. Not really. I'm not a Zen student, but you do get to learn patience, that's for sure.
I was going to say, that's a new fact about you. I didn't know. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Keith. Topher, could you give us a little bit more about how you got started in SEO and your background?
Yeah, so hi, everybody. I'm Topher Kohan. I'm the senior product director of SEO and growth for the Weather Company, or weather.com for those of you. We're an IBM business. We're owned by the same people that Keith worked for. I got started, this is my second career. My original career, I worked in the entertainment industry. I was a tour manager / lighting designer for theater, ballet, opera, rock and roll, all that kind of stuff. And I did that for a while. I have multiple degrees in technical theater production, which are serving me really well now in my life. But I'm old, much like Keith, in the fact that you used to get a job by sending slides out, like physical 35 millimeter slides. And so this new thing called the internet was happening, and I decided to learn how to build websites. And I ran a little business where I built templates for other performers and actors and designers and such. And they told me about this brand new thing called the search engine. And so I started doing this stuff for them, and that led to me to realize, oh my God, this is like a thing. I can make a job at this. And through this and that, I decided to stop doing that and start doing this. I worked for myself for years. I've probably been doing SEO for 15, 20 years-ish, somewhere in there. I remember the Florida update. I did it for a while. Then I worked for Turner Broadcasting. They have a little website out of Atlanta called CNN. And I was the head of SEO for Turner Digital News, so CNN, CNN International, and all their properties. Did that through the 2008 and 2012 elections. And then I left there, went to the agency side for a while. I am not cut out for agency work even a little tiny bit. Not even a little bit. I have all the respect in the world for people who work agency because I don't understand how they do it. And then I left there and I went to work, and I came here to the Weather Company. And then we were we were acquired by IBM. Before all of that, when I went back to school to get a degree as a web developer, so I have a degree as a web developer with an emphasis in search marketing. And that during that time period, I worked for the Center for Disease Control as their search marketing consultant. So that's kind of my world. I love in-house SEO because first of all, I'm not cut out for the world of agency, but I like to know my site, not just the site itself, but the vertical my site in. I knew little to nothing about weather before I came here, and now I can speak relatively intelligently on forecasting and meteorology and things like that, because I feel like if you don't know your vertical, you can't effectively market your brand. And so at the agency, I found myself never knowing enough about what I was working on, and that frustrated me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us so far. I'm super excited to hear what both you and Keith are going to bring to the table. Jackie, if you could share about how you got started into SEO, what it's like with Dropbox.
Yeah, so I got started in SEO about 9 years ago. I've really done it my whole professional career. I was doing like a very poorly paid internship at this not great agency who mostly specialized in franchises. And this is at the time where you could literally just like copy and paste the same content block, just change out like the city, and you would rank locally for keywords. That's pretty much what I was doing, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's like a little bit of like publishing, a little bit of analytics. So I was like, that's interesting. Don't want to work here, but definitely want to like continue my education in this. And then I started actually working at a backlink agency for lawyers. So I definitely started agency side first, and then I think my first in-house job was working at Spin Media. We were a publishing company that owned about, I think it was like at the time like 12, 15 websites. So we were just working on like the CMS, less so like the content strategy. And ever since then, I've like only worked in-house. I really have so much love for working in-house just because like one, I think I'm a really naturally social person. I like working with people, getting to know my coworkers. And I'm also like, I love to win. And I think that I personally feel much more empowered in-house. You know what I mean? Because you're actually the person who's like driving initiatives, who's getting the alignment. And whereas like, I feel like a lot of times agency side, like you have to like will your counterpart, the person who's like actually engaging you to get that to happen. And so I like both the accountability, but also being responsible for like the win as well. And then I started working at like tech companies in the Bay Area. My fiance, is in tech as well, and worked at Square for a little while, then went to Uber, and then now at Dropbox. So yeah, I have a running joke that I do SEO for RSUs, because that's like kind of been my track record so far at these companies. Yeah, and so I have a small team here, and we run SEO and ASO for Dropbox.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Jackie. You kind of touched on the very first thing that I wanted to talk about, but Keith, I'd love to hear your input on how do you see in-house SEO being different from agency life? Jackie mentioned on how it's easier to kind of quantify wins with that. Keith, do you see any other differentiating factors between in-house versus agency life as an SEO?
I mean, to be fair, I've only done some individual consulting when I was in one particular in-house role that didn't keep me particularly busy. So I was, I can't say I've ever actually worked at an SEO agency per se. So if you ask me the differences between the two, I'm going to be basing it on what my friends like yourself have told me in the past. When it comes to, Topher hit on it perfectly. You really get to know your vertical really, really well in a way that I don't think you can as an agency. That's one of the reasons that I'm very big on involving subject matter experts at the earliest levels of the SEO process, because they know the need, they know the solutions, they know the conversations around the problems that your product or service addresses better than anybody. And so as an SEO in an in-house capacity, you get to know those problems like the back of your hand as well. Now, of course, it's a bit of a challenge when you're at a company like IBM and you've got so many products and services. And that's one of the reasons that we split the team out into working with the individual business units so that they can become specialists in cloud or artificial intelligence or quantum computing. And so, that's one of the challenges that we have as an in-house team is, of course, when you're the larger the site, the less likely you are going to get to know every aspect of the product and service. But yeah, Topher hit on it perfectly when he talked about getting to know that vertical as best as you can. I don't know if that luxury is possible at the agency level, unless you have like some of our agency of records who work with us side by side, who get to know the product as well. If you're just sort of one of the agencies that addresses a problem and you're not brought on for a long-term contract, there's a good chance you're not going to get to know the product as well.
So it sounds like some of the most positives are really getting to know your brand, being able to see the wins, and being able to really speak the right product voice and brand voice. Topher, changing gears from positives about in-house SEO, could you share one of your most scariest experiences, or maybe one of your most challenging that you came across through your experience as an in-house?
So I have two, actually. Like I said, I was at CNN for both the 08 and the 12 election. But as we know, there's an election between that in 2010. And we were changing technologies for moving into 2010 election. And I had a huge win in 2008. That's how I made my name as an SEO in the industry. I outranked President-elect Barack Obama for his own site. I ranked #1 for the term election and election results when rankings mattered. I had a huge win, and I kind of got a little bit arrogant and didn't pay attention to all the technology changes we made to the site going into 10. And I got my behind handed to me in ways that aren't even funny. And luckily for me, I built up a lot of goodwill with my boss and the company, because I would have fired me in a heartbeat. Pretty easy. Now, that said, fast forward to many, many years later, I'm working here at Weather, and the whole move to mobile first is happening. We have a dedicated audience that's a little bit older who uses desktop machines, but we were seeing that audience shift. So I concentrated. I'm an SEO team of one. I'm the entire SEO team for weather.com and Weather Underground. We have an agency of record, but I'm it. So I decided to move my focus to bolstering our SEO for mobile and mobile search, and doing a lot of work there. And as it happens, I'm sure everyone either on this panel or on the call has had this happen. My boss's boss's boss, so at the time the CEO of Weather, he's now the head of a division here at IBM, reached out to me and asked me to come into the office at 11 o'clock at night, and wanted to put me in a room full of executives and asked me why, when he typed in the storm's name, we didn't show up on his computer.
Ooh.
So I stood there and I said, because, and I gave a reason why. First of all, just typing in, I think it was Harvey, typing in Harvey isn't going to get you what you need, and most people aren't searching that way. Also, that we made a conscious effort because of our resources to move to mobile. I showed them how we're ranking in mobile and all that stuff, and I explained personalized search. And you're doing this while there's a room full of people who all have SVP something or executive vice something as their title, staring at you. And the question, which I'm sure we've all heard before, well, we have a contact at Google, can't we just call them? I said, if you'd like to do that, go right ahead, but I don't really think that's going to help us any. That's not typically how this works, but go right ahead. And I walked out of the room and I went home, and the next morning my boss at the time looked at me, and I was very blunt and said, that's never happening again. I'm never gonna put me in that position again. And they agreed, and it's been all been good. I've been lucky in my career. I've had some really fantastic managers and bosses who believed in SEO and believed in what it did for the brand, and have supported and backed me, because I've always worked on small, either one person or very small teams with agency of records. So I've been very lucky in my career that's happened. So yeah, those are my fun times.
Yeah, you really run into a big challenge there, especially with a big company. You don't realize it happens, but there are CEOs out there who spend a lot of time Googling themselves. And so I can tell you, there were back at Dell, Michael Dell would get up, and I don't know what's up with these executives and their weird hours, but he'd be up at 2 or 3 in the morning, Googling random, Dell related terms. And then, the next thing you know, 7 o'clock in the morning, we'd be getting emails from him going, why are we not ranking for this? Why are we not ranking for this? Why are we not ranking for this? And that's always a real big challenge as an in-house team. It makes it look like you're not doing your job, and you can't succinctly say to him, hey, listen, we've been asking for this technical change, or we've been asking for this to change, and it hasn't been prioritized. It hasn't been put into we haven't received budget for this. It's very hard to give that explanation when they're right in your face going, why are we not ranking for this term? So I sympathize with you, Topher.
We all love the phrase.
I have been there too. I have gotten executives to rank for their names before.
SEO doesn't work, right? Have we all heard an executive say SEO isn't working? Have we all heard that? Right? Yeah, that's my favorite,
Well,
especially when you say,
I think the most frustrating thing is when people do, like, to Topher's point, a random search, and like at least like Harvey was like a relevant term. Sometimes they'll just like search some random term that literally has like 10 searches a month, and you're like, you understand, we actually try to work based off of like search demand, but we rank for this much bigger word, and then it turns into like this very long deck. And so being in-house involves a lot of communication education for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us are alone in that process. I think that's maybe one of the largest struggles with being an in-house SEO. So do you have any advice for other in-house SEOs who run across this, even if they're not in a larger company? I feel like sometimes smaller companies, it's even more difficult to communicate the importance of SEO and when you need to prioritize, like say a technical change, like Keith mentioned. Do you have any advice or any methods that have worked in the past, either Jackie, Keith, or Topher, on how you can communicate importance to an exec or to a CEO?
Yeah, so I think like anytime you're speaking to somebody who's like that level of leadership, to like Topher's point again, you have to be pretty like succinct, because you don't want to like drown them in like SEO jargon that like doesn't really make sense to them, doesn't really have any context. I actually like trying to take that moment of urgency to kind of highlight something else that I'm trying to like get through. Like for example, like we were the particular reason why the executives were not ranking for their names was because they had built the executives into a like React-based slider. So you actually needed to click event to see the content based off of all the pages. And I used that as leverage to get resourcing to actually change other components on the site that were also not very SEO friendly. So you can actually like turn around that leverage. And I also actually even use the kind of like step function change that we saw later on, because another thing that you end up doing as an in-house SEO is you always end up doing these like SEO 101s. You always have to be like, this is SEO, this is what we did. And you start like kind of cataloging the little wins that you have day by day. So I actually saved that win because since there was so much executive visibility, we were able to like get product and engineering, and like I worked on this. And so you saw that like step function change in SEO traffic. Which a lot of times people like, the reason why they're not sure if SEO is working or not is because like, we do so many like micro optimizations. It's the product changes where you see like that step function change. And so I actually saved that as an example of like when SEO was working. And even though it wasn't directly correlated to like our business goals, obviously, like it didn't change our North Star metric by any means, but it was at least something where people could physically see that SEO was working. And I think that that's really important. It's like they have to see that it's working, like with their eyes a lot of times. And sometimes that's an up and to the right graph. Sometimes it's like a revenue number. But I think because SEO feels like so nebulous to people who don't do SEO, unless they see like something like that, it's hard for them to understand like, why is it so important, and like, does it really work?
Yeah, I think the importance of showing a point of reference. Like, so for us, storms are the big deal, right? That's our big traffic hitter. So I make sure that when I talk about the percentage of traffic that we're getting from mobile and from desktop and those kind of things, I always say it, on a sunny day. Sunny day is what we call a normal day here, like a no weather event day. Doesn't have to be sunny, but just means that there's not a hurricane, a tornado, winter storm. It's just a sunny day. So on a sunny day, we get X% of traffic from Google to our mobile pages. And today we got X% more. That always helps. It really, really does help. And to point out, I try to, Jackie hit it on the head, you don't want to overload them. You don't want to go down a rabbit hole. They don't really give a crap about Bert or caffeine or whatever. They don't care. But to say, hey, Google made a change. We are doing this to try to mitigate that change. Or Google made a change. We don't think it impacts us, but we're watching it, is really helpful to let them know that, because you're right, the day-to-day, there's a good chance they're saying, well, what are you doing? Right. So to say, to constantly be in that flow, our execs read SEJ and Search Engine Journal and Search Engine Roundtable and Google's blog. So it's, when I post something that comes up, there's no, oh, I've never heard of this, because they've read it. So I need to stay on top of it and let them know that we're paying attention to it.
So I feel like that could even be a double-edged sword, because part of the issue, it sounds like, could be communication and educating about SEO. But then if you have your execs actually reading up on Search Engine Journal and hearing about all of the latest, do you find yourself, Topher, putting out a lot of fires before they even start? A lot of like execs getting afraid of big news alerts, or I mean, algorithm updates happening left and right. How do you best calm the storm before the storm even comes?
I want to be very clear. If I could block the IP of every SEO blog on the planet in my building, I'd do it tomorrow. Because the worst isn't informational updates. The worst is when, and I understand why they do this, when a blog reports something that Gary or John has said, and it's taken out of context in their mind, or it's something that pertains to an e-commerce site or to a different kind of site. You know, Keith and I and Jackie, to an extent, I assume we have lucky the fact that our brand allows us to be a little bit of a bull in the china shop, because there's I don't remember the last time I worked for a brand the size I work for now, or my passing, where I got massively hit by an algorithm update. Right. Yes, I've had to tweak. I've had some problems. There was that video update a couple of years ago that was trying to get adult sites with the thumbnails. We got caught in that because we have a lot of thumbnail pages, but that quickly resolved itself. A little bit of help on our end, right? But that happens. So I think you're right. It's a lot of, I do training consistently, and I do it at 3 levels. I do it for the editorial staff. I do it for our video staff, and I also do it for the dev/exec as like a hybrid kind of thing, which is just SEO 101 and updates. And I think that's the way to do it, is to really keep them in the loop, and to always be available and be very, very, very calm, which is, if you met me more than 10 minutes, it's a little hard for me, to sit down with them and say, I understand that you read that Google said that we should do X. We should remove here's the right one. We should remove the pagination, rel equals next, rel equals last, because they no longer pay attention to it. Well, okay, but it still works. I see no reason to spend dev resources to remove a piece of code that is less than a K total just because Google said this. It's that kind of mentality you have to deal with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, Topher brings up a good point, and it's one of the things I really appreciate about Slack, is that we are now able to keep the lines of communication open across the entire organization as it relates to SEO. So anyone at any time in IBM can reach out to the SEO team and ask a question. We also use those channels to really relay the most important news that is going to affect, most likely, our team or our organization. So we do let that that information, we don't, I wouldn't say we let it drip, but we certainly don't let the full flow of it go out across the entire network, because as Topher said, some of that stuff really doesn't matter, and we're already addressing some of those issues already. It's not an easy thing when you've got an overly connected person who is constantly harping like, oh, I read this today. And you know how Barry is with the Search Engine Roundtable. He will notify you of every hint of a problem that pops up in Webmaster World, for example, or any of the other forums. And some of those just really never hit us because, as Topher also said, and I've had the benefit of working for some large brands that aren't affected by a lot of these algorithm changes, because we don't, first of all, we have a very conservative approach to SEO. We don't take a lot of risks. If you ask me what IBM's link building strategy is, I've got nothing to give you, because we let the brand earn the links. We let the products and the services earn the links, and we let that happen, and we're doing okay, right, Topher? We're doing okay. I got 1.8 billion links coming into IBM. I'm okay.
I have over 900 million. I think we're fine. Right?
I think we're fine.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things about working in-house. It's that, like, one, I never want to do link building ever again. And it was kind of funny because when I was at I was at like tech booths, somebody was like, Jackie, why do you always work at these like big companies? And I'm like, I honestly, like, I kind of love it, you know, like big companies, sure, they have their own problems. But they fundamentally are supposed to rank, right? Like great SEO cannot make things that fundamentally suck not suck. So you know that this company is supposed to rank for cloud storage. You know, like Square should rank for point of sale, even though at the time we first started SEO program, we were ranking like third page. Like these companies are supposed to rank. So if you can just like get the right people to move, the right things to be prioritized, you can have like these incredible wins because they already fundamentally have the building blocks there. They just need to like get out of the way themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of switching gears a little bit. Keith, I'm super interested to hear. So say I am CMO of a new startup, a new brand, and I am starting to build out my marketing department. I add on an SEO department. What is the making of the perfect SEO department? Like if you budget wasn't a question, how many people do you need? What are the people doing? What roles does it look like? Like what's the minimum for a good in-house SEO team for a brand?
Well, if you're just starting out, obviously that's going to be, it's not going to need to necessarily be a large team per se, and you're probably going to supplement your work a lot with agencies as it is. I would certainly be very conservative about who you chose as an agency. You know, the moment somebody mentions PBN to me as an agency, I'm going to say, you're done. We're out of here. Bye. Don't talk to me again. That's not to say that, you know, I'm disparaging anyone who uses PBMs at this point, but I don't recommend them. I would certainly say, as you're building out the team with the supplemental help from the agency, and maybe they can even help you find people. Some agencies are very good at that as well. You know, as you're building out your team, you're thinking about, okay, I want someone to be able to focus on technical. I want someone to be able to focus on content. I want someone to be able to maybe even focus on internal evangelism, because ultimately what I'm looking for is every marketer in my organization to be an SEO, if that makes sense. I want them to understand how their individual roles affect SEO. I want my developers to understand how their individual roles affect SEO. So I've always been a big advocate of evangelism across the entire organization to get to meet with people. And here's the thing, I love SEO 1 training as much as the next person, but I'm going to focus on training that person on how their specific role is impacting SEO, how they can help with our efforts. So a developer probably doesn't need to know a thing about link building, probably doesn't need to understand anything about content writing, but they probably need to understand a lot about minification. They probably need to understand a lot more about, you know, schema markup and other sorts of markup that will help us ultimately page load speeds, you know, whatever, you know, it may be. But that developer probably doesn't want to know about the history of Google that I would give in an SEO 101 class. So again, specialize as you evangelize. Ooh, that's a nice phrase. Specialize as you evangelize.
Jackie, would you agree that starting out with an agency is usually a good point from a startup? You've worked with a lot of big brands. At what point do you start to grow the in-house team? Like Keith mentioned, starting with technical, then going content. Is it usually like a very clear sign that, all right, we need to build out this department?
Yeah, I think classic canned SEO answer, it really depends. I think if you have an English-only site that's built on WordPress that already automates a lot of the best practices in SEO for you, then you probably don't need like a dedicated tech SEO headcount. Where most of these big companies really get in trouble is when they start having a really big site of scale, or if they have internationalization, like classic, just like nobody can get hreflang right out the gate, it's like never. Or in the case of like if you have a more like product-driven company, like right, like Topher is not making pages manually, right? Whereas like I'm making pages like manually with the content team. It really just depends. If you're kind of more like e-commerce, or if you're more like product driven, then you're going to need like a tech SEO. If you're really just like a SaaS company that is basically mostly in English with like a few conversion pages, then you're probably fine with somebody who kind of can like fill both those hats. But yeah, as you scale and as the site gets bigger, as you inevitably end up having like more services that are powering the site, that's when having like someone who's like dedicated to technical is like super helpful in my experience. But where I've seen most companies really, really need it, where they mess up, is when it comes to internationalization.
And Topher, have you ever, I mean, with a lot of the brands that you've worked with, educating seems to be a big aspect of it. Both Jackie and Keith have touched on like educating execs. From an in-house perspective and even educating your team, what are some of the best SEO training resources?
So I shouldn't make everybody, I recommend highly that everybody go through and do the Moz, read through Moz's, SEO 101 stuff. It's really well written. It's boilerplate. There is not a lot of, I've told a joke years ago that Simon likes to retell over and over again. Ask 10 SEOs how to do something. You get 15 answers and 9 of them will be right. Right? There's not a lot of that debate within that Moz 101 stuff. It's pretty boilerplate straight ahead. And then outside of that, I really like to tailor the training to the platform. Keith hit on it. I don't need a developer to know about link building. I don't need them to understand how the algorithm works at a granular detail. But the person who's working with the editorial staff needs to understand that side way better. And I don't need them to understand schema, right? So I really kind of tailor the training to them. The one thing I think is important to say across the board is that I really want those people to be passionate and own what they are learning, right? So so that I think helps them learn exactly what they need to learn. There's tons of great resources. I have them go to conferences. We all speak at conferences, and I think that I tend to lose sight at the incredibly great information that's been given out at these conferences to the seasoned and the unseasoned practitioner who doesn't have the bonus of a community like we do, where I can reach out to anyone on this call, or we have a dozen other people who can reach out and go, hey, what the heck's going on here? So I think that going to conferences, doing the Moz 101, reading up on blogs, but also making sure they understand that not everything they're going to come across is particularly impactful on their. We have a homebrew. We're back end on ours, so hiring someone that's really great at Yoast isn't going to do me a lot of good. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what everyone's saying too, it's that like usually when you come to these companies and there's not a history of SEO, the initial misconception that happens that really actually like hurts your SEO initiatives is people think like, oh, Topher exists. He's doing SEO. He's responsible for SEO, or like he's doing SEO. And once they kind of make that shift from like SEO is something the SEO person does to like SEO happens throughout the site, there are so many different like levers in SEO. Like SEO is an umbrella function. It's a team sport. Like you're one of the players as well. And they start like coming to you. Like they start being like, hey, somebody asked for this change. I think it could have like a negative SEO impact. That's like a magical moment when people realize that SEO is not just something that's like one and done. SEO did it, SEO'd the page, and they actually realize that it's like this ongoing effort of like constant optimizations, and like everything from like content to like how you're delivering images has an impact on your ability to be competitive in search. And that's why I think it's also really important too to even like to socialize things that go wrong, like because sometimes people will like launch things that you're not involved in, and then you actually see like a very like a negative dip, and that's actually a really good opportunity to also use to like educate people and be like, hey, like these things actually really do have an impact on our ability to be successful as an organization.
That's such a good point to take the time and energy to make sure other departments understand that the SEO person is not just an SEO thing. It's actually a team effort, and all departments are affected by it. So, okay, we've built out this new department. We have our SEO team. We've no longer hired agency. We now have people in-house. Now it comes time to report on what they're doing, what's happening. Keith, at IBM, or even in your experience when it comes to reporting, usually agencies will deliver like monthly client reports like, hey, here's where your organic is, here's what's going on in your rankings. do you deliver something similar, or how often are you doing reporting, and what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, reporting is pretty much an ongoing thing. People can check it at any time. We have a platform within IBM called Pearl, which aggregates all of our analytics, all of our bright edge inputs, all of the information from multi-touch attribution, or how the leads funnel, everything. So they can go in at any time and get whatever information they need, which is really great. Democratizing SEO is great, but also democratizing data also helps people address things pretty quickly. But we do have a monthly readout that we provide at our monthly SEO community call, as well as to our executives. So it's something that's evolved over time, and it continues to evolve as information becomes available or is deprecated. So I was just having a conversation earlier today with OMCP, and we were talking about keyword traffic reporting, and I said, here's the thing, I don't do keyword traffic reporting. I haven't done that since 2013, since Google started obfuscating all of that data. So I didn't try to supplement it with GSC data. I didn't try to supplement it with any other tools at all. I didn't try to sort of extrapolate based on ranking and not provided and other traffic to sort of come up with a fudgy number. I just stopped and I said, this is not going to be valuable data for you. So in the same way, we take a look at the data that we're providing on a monthly basis, and we're seeing if it's an actual valuable bit of information. I do find that sometimes it's the executive that will tell us what they want to see. Is it just a purely revenue number? Did you drive more revenue this quarter? Did we improve ranking, and does it really matter? Is it ranking overall that needs to improve, or is it just on page one that we need to be talking about? So there's a number of things that we do vary.
Yeah, and speaking of revenue, one of the largest questions coming from SEO is, how do you achieve sales and revenue? How does it? I'm sure with Jackie, you have a completely different model for sharing revenue with Dropbox. But Topher, I'm curious with weather.com, how do you correlate SEO to generating revenue?
So it's interesting. We do most of our reporting is on percentages. X percentage of traffic into a platform comes to this, right? And so with that, I then build out I do it quarterly, not monthly, but quarterly I build out a report that says, these are the amount of impressions we generated. And I break it down by template type and from our referrals from search engines. And those, then there's a number type to that. This template, an impression is worth X dollars or X cents or whatever it is. And so then that's how I built it out. But I only do that on a quarterly. On a monthly and a daily, it's just about the percentages. I'm kind of old school. I actually have a notebook, and every day I go into our analytics and I physically write down the total referrals for our overall platform, for our desktop platform, and our mobile platform. And I do that because there are many times during a day that someone will say to me, hey, I know we did this work. What's the SEO impact? And so off the top of my head, I can say, oh yeah, we've got an X percentage amount of change, or the platform is actually slightly down or slightly up. And that's only because I took the time to write it down on a daily basis. So I have a little bit of a running information in my head. But when it comes to revenue, yeah, I do it on a quarterly basis, and I do it by template type. So we have like a handful of templates across our site, and I know what an impression is worth on those pages, and so I dig into our analytics and pull that into Excel, and use Python and Pearl and write scripts and such.
When you say writing down, you mean pen and paper? That'll thing?
I have a notebook, and I have a fountain pen. I use a fountain pen to do it too.
Wow, look at you.
In the digital world, I like being a little bit of a Luddite. So I have
You do it in calligraphy?
No, I don't, but I do buy really nice notebooks, and I write really nicely in them, and I grid it out for the dates and everything, and this way I can go in and at any point go back. I have the notebooks from when I walked in the door on July 6th, 2013, all the way through today, and I have one notebook per year.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And to have it cataloged like that, that's fantastic, and probably honestly maybe even more helpful. I know for me personally, I transfer everything to paper and pen, and even though I duplicate it on a Google Doc too, I end up transferring it.
Yeah.
Jackie, I'd love to hear how with Dropbox.
Like, give me a sticky
Yes,
note.
sticky note life. I'd love to hear with Dropbox, how do you attribute revenue to your SEO and to your team's SEO efforts?
Yeah, so most of these companies, like in my experience in SaaS, most of them have some kind of multi-touch or attribution model. I would say generally most people either lean into like multi-touch or last touch, which is not usually great for SEO when it comes to the buyer journey, just because, you know, we tend to be the people who bring people into the funnel. We're not always necessarily like the closer. And so that will tend to like usually over-index a little bit on paid search. Actually, Dropbox's digital marketing arm is pretty nascent. They actually didn't do any sort of digital marketing, I think, until like 3 years ago. So we're still building out a lot of our analytics infrastructure today. But we do use actually like a first touch basis, which has been really great for SEO, for getting buy-in as well. But you basically just say like, okay, of all the people who were your first touch, this is their like LTV, and then you pretty much get to take like credit, so to speak, for those kind of activations. Because generally what happens I see is that most people start off like just tracking traffic, and then they're like, okay, traffic is a nonsense metric that doesn't actually, like, traffic doesn't keep the lights on. So then they'll start caring about like activations or like signups, whatever the North Star is, and then they'll realize most signups are garbage anyways. So then you'll start like over-indexing on like what is like the high LTV users or high LTV products. So yeah, we basically try to back it down into some kind of revenue number.
Yeah, so we obviously, weather data is pretty commoditized. You can find out if it's going to be hot or cold, or if something's going to fall on your head a billion places. So for me, it's on top of revenue, I want to know what else that user's doing, right? So what's their time on page? What's their bounce rate? Am I compelling that third click, that second click, that third click? You know, I talk about it all the time that we know that 95% of all users just want to know that it's going to hot, cold, or stuff going to fall on their head. But we also know that 70% of the people who go to, when they get a piece of weather information, go to a second source to correlate and double check. So I'm always trying to figure out, okay, I've gotten you out of Google into my site. How do I compel you to make that second click? Not just come and say, is it going to be hot or cold today? Do I need to, you know, bring an umbrella? But how do I make you click into something? And it's mostly to monetize. Let's be clear. You know, dollars make the world go round, keep the lights on. But also, I want to make you a user. I've always said for a long time that it's a little different here, but for most sites, the big enterprise sites, I don't want you to be a lifelong searcher for me. I want you to be a lifelong user of me. So if I lose you as a search referral after your fourth time, but I keep you as a monthly active user or daily or weekly active user, whatever my KPI is, then I've won, so that's a conversion rate. Or if I've driven you into the app, if you have an enterprise app or whatever that is, you know, then I'm okay with that. I'm okay with losing you as a searcher if I've moved you into another vertical of the business that will make you a lifelong and a more monetizable user of my product.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I've been adamant a good portion of my career of changing SEO from search engine optimization to search experience optimization, because we're trying to create an experience here, and that's why it's so important for us to work across teams with our PPC folks, our social media folks. We really want to get people to constantly associate IBM and its brands with whatever they're searching that's related to us. Of course, not everything, you know, because we know people will perform 12 searches before they ever start using a brand term with their search. We know this. And so the idea is I want to make sure that we're showing up for the majority of those 12 searches, so they begin to start associating, okay, Watson or IBM with what they need. And then once we get them in, we want to keep them. We want to make sure that that experience was a good experience. They're able to plug into our community. They're able to start following us on social media, and they stick with us as a result of that.
Unfortunately, I don't know how, but time has flown by, and we only have time for one more question. For those attending the webinar, we are going to open up to Q&A right after this question. So I see questions are coming through. Now is a great time to start typing away your questions if you have any questions for the panelists. My last and final question for you all, and I would actually love to hear from each of you. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but tools. What tools do you all do? Keith, you can start us off. You had mentioned the reporting tool that you use, but for your other SEO efforts, what tools do you use on a regular basis?
So we do keep a toolbox in general. We don't limit ourselves to a single tool. While we do need to have a single source of truth across the entire organization, we do use Bright Edge for that. And the main reasons is we want to have everybody in the organization to be able to have access to that data. And you've got to go with the big guys. When you're doing, you've got to go with a conductor, or you've got to go with an SEO Clarity, or you've got to go with Bright Edge in order to be able to do that, because most of the other tools can't handle having. We have 350,000 employees at IBM. That's a lot of employees. Now, even if a very small portion of that it needs access to our SEO tools, that's a lot of people. Let's say 40,000 or 50,000 people need to have access to that data. Most platforms can't handle having an additional 40 to 50,000 users for an individual account. So we've got to have that single source of truth. But on top of that, for minor crawls, for someone that needs me to do a spot crawl, I use Screaming Frog. I think a lot of people use that. It's a very dependable tool for that. We use Ahrefs for backlink data. We also have access to Majestic data as well if we want to start looking into some of the more historical link stuff. And then what else? I know there's more. We also we use Deep Crawl for monthly crawls, and that's just sort of our ongoing crawl to sort of make sure that we're seeing any big changes that occur across the site. But getting into analytics, obviously we've had Core Metrics or IBM Analytics for the longest time that we've used. We're making a switch right now, but I can't say anything about it until it's official, I guess.
Top secret.
It's not that secret, but it's probably something I shouldn't be the one to announce. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's quite a lengthy list of tools. Topher, did Keith miss any? Do you use a lot of the same, or do you have a completely different tool set?
So it's funny. So because I'm a much smaller team here at Weather, right, I have a little bit different needs. I have access to all the tools that Keith just mentioned because we're an IBM business, and I take advantage of that on a pretty regular basis. We use SEMrush for a lot of stuff here. Screaming Frog, Deep Crawl when needed. Both Majestic and Ahrefs are big items in my toolbox. Here's a pro tip for everybody who's interviewing for an in-house job in your life, and someone asks you what tools you use. Make sure you bring up Excel or Google Sheets. I have not hired SEOs in my life because when they rattle off tools, they didn't talk about a way to parse data.
Great, I'm fired.
I also was like,
yes. So that's so those are the ones for us. It's a little different here than it is at IBM, and I don't know how it is at Dropbox. We don't have a lot of people in the tool sets. I'm generating a lot of reports and giving them out. Search Console, almost everybody's in Search Console, so you're seeing that data. I'm doing supplemental data on top of that with other stuff, other information. But yeah, that's kind of what we use there. So.
And Jackie, what does the team at Dropbox use?
So classic SEMrush, Ahrefs. For crawling, we use Botify, which is super interesting and it's kind of like, I like to compare it to like the stat of crawler tools. It's like a very similar, I think initially almost discouraging interface, but then once you get to know it, once you get to like really understand how to use the tool, it's really interesting. And then I don't know, personally, I like using Stat quite a bit for keyword tracking just because it's really fast and I'm a very impatient person. And I'm also kind of cheap, if I'm being super honest. And then the other thing that I use like day in and day out, not a Dropbox, I haven't set it up yet, but I love looking at my server log data just because if you actually get to know like what is the frequency that Google crawls your site, what is like their behavior on the site, you can actually see changes like as they're actually happening, or like you can see people like shift things, like all of a sudden there's 406ing like Googlebot or something like that. You can actually see those things as they happen before you've actually like realized a traffic dip. And so I actually was, at Uber, I was at the point where I was looking at my log data like every day. And analytics, maybe less. So I do like to use keyword trackers, but to these fine gentlemen point, I don't like to necessarily like report on those keywords, just because like otherwise people like, you know, get so caught up in like these like random keywords. I just like using it to see like, are things directionally going up or down? But I always feel like that North Star metric should be either traffic, or it should be some kind of revenue as a result of the traffic you're driving.
That makes sense. Thank you all for sharing those tools. We are switching over to audience Q&A. We've got a couple questions already coming in. This one I'm even very interested myself to hear from the panelists. So this question, what KPIs other than clicks and visitors from organic traffic are used to measure ROI for investment and resources for SEO? Feel free to take the floor if you have a response. If not, I'll pick on one of you.
So like I said earlier, it's if I can compel that second click, right? If I can show that a referral from search is spending, not just coming and finding out what the weather is going to be for that day, but actually spending more time or watching video or whatever, when I can show that and then layer in quarterly the revenue KPI. But really, if I can show the value of a user as more than just a one and done, then that's how I can say, okay, you know, if I have more resources, if we can do X or we can do Y, then I can expand this.
Keith, would you agree with that? Are those kind of the metrics that you look at as well, that second click?
Yeah, I mean, obviously traffic is quite important year over year, month over month. You know, we certainly are aware that even in our business, there are seasonal changes that we need to be aware of. But that aside, engagement rate increase is one of the things that we're very interested in seeing. We want to make sure that engagement rate is growing over time. And when I say engagement rate, keep in mind we have so many different metrics of what a success factor is at IBM, because sometimes it's someone submitting a lead, and sometimes it's just them clicking through to an additional article on one of our blogs. So it really does vary. So that's why we just use sort of the general term engagement rate.
Engagement rate. Perfect. And the next and final question of the day, Jackie, if you don't mind taking this one away, because I would personally love to hear how Dropbox does it. This question, how do you create your content? Do you have an in-house team or do you outsource it? What do you find to be the best?
Yeah, so I've traditionally only ever done my content in-house. But that being said, like other arms at Uber would use third-party agencies to scale the content. So I think it really depends. Like, is the content like really close to the product? Because today we actually are building out like the core product pages of Dropbox essentially. And so because of that, you know, when you're talking about something like cloud storage in the context of Dropbox, you actually really do have to partner very close with like, you know, the PMM that's assigned to it and the like product manager, because you want to make sure that you're telling the company narrative like in a way that, you know, is going to make sense on these like core pages of your site. But if you're just talking about like top of funnel blog content, I actually am a really big fan of using like freelancers or agencies. I personally really like freelancers because you can really tap into a really high quality writer who tends to have like subject matter expertise in this subject matter area. Whereas like I feel like agencies are really great if you're just somebody who wants like volume and scale. So I think it really depends. So when I think of like the really great B2B content like farms, like the NerdWallets, the Intuits, the like all those kind of companies, they've all kind of like scaled that content through influencers, or like Healthline even. That's like a really great example of an SEO driven content strategy. I really think that, you know, having a managing editor and like freelancers who are subject matter experts who can make really great content, especially in like the world of it's a little bit harder, I think, to scale through the agencies these days if you have a like, you know, your money, your life kind of site.
That makes sense. So of course the lovely SEO answer, it depends, but really it truly does on the situation. Keith, Topher, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your lovely in-house wisdom. Really appreciate your time and being on the panel. Thank you to all of the attendees who joined us. If you have any questions or want to learn more about Authority Labs, you can visit authoritylabs.com. Otherwise, thank you, and make sure and follow all of these people on Twitter. Keith, Topher, and Jackie are always sharing great things. Thank you guys and take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.